Hello, everybody. Today I'm joined by Mikolaj from Nanoo Games, and we're going to be talking about the Hussite Trilogy Adventure Game. So it's great to be speaking to you.
Yeah, it's great to speak to you too.
I think, first off, people will probably not be as familiar with the Hussite Trilogy as the author's other work, The Witcher. So do you want to give us a quick idea of what the Hussite Trilogy is and where it's based?
Oh yeah, so as you mentioned, like the Sapkowski, the author of The Witcher, is known mainly because of his series The Witcher, but he also made some other novels, including the so-called Hussite Trilogy. For now, there's only one book that is translated into English, which is called The Tower of Fools. Mm-hmm. So basically, the Hussite Trilogy is a historical novel, but with the fantasy elements. Mm-hmm. So it's based in the medieval Bohemia and Silesia.
Yeah.
And it's the background of the story is Hussite Wars. That's why we call it, at least in Poland, Hussite Trilogy. Mm-hmm. So it's a story about Rainemar of Bielawa, who is the main hero of the entire story, and mainly the first of the three books. Mm-hmm. And he and his other companions, adventurers, they roam through the lands because they're let's not go too deep into the story, but they have to like run away from dangers.
Yeah. So it's an adventure series set within a set of crusades, and around that then you've built a board game, an adventure board game.
Yes. So basically thought that it would be a cool idea to make the scenes from the story mm-hmm. and implement them into the board game, because the style that Sapkowski has is very, very nice when you want to depict some kind of a scene or some kind of a lore. And we thought that it would be a great idea to go and make a board game out of it. There's a lot of action, there's a lot of mystery, a lot of secrets. So yeah, I think it's...
Yeah. So you've got it set up on Tabletop Simulator there, at least your test version. Do you want to bring it up and show us the sort of idea you have for realizing a novel on the tabletop then?
Yes, let me turn on the sharing. Okay, can you see it now?
Yes. Yep.
Okay, so here we see the basic components. Mm-hmm. There's one piece missing because there you can see the character tokens. Mm-hmm. In the game, in the actual board game, we're going to have a miniatures. Sure. 35 millimeters scale miniatures. You can see them on our website, and mm-hmm. you'll later see in the campaign. So for now, we have to work with these. So basically, the game have 4 factions that we can choose from. There are the adventurers. So mm-hmm. I explained the core of the entire story. There are road beaters, the robber mm-hmm. knights, black knights with beer cart mm-hmm. as the leader, and the Sturge family. We, of course, plan to add more factions, but it will depend solely on the progress of the campaign.
Sure.
The game is a skirmish game, at least one of the modes of the game, because there are mm-hmm. 2 modes. There's the adventure mode, in which we recreate the scenes from the book, and there is one player who's playing, we can say, environment, mm-hmm. and several players playing the characters from the adventures. Did I explain it right?
Yeah.
I hope so.
Yeah.
And the other mode is basically a rivalry mode or tournament mode, mm-hmm. where you just pick one of the factions. You have a certain amount of points. It's very similar to war games, like Warhammer is probably the most recognizable one.
So how many players does the game take then? Is it 2 to 4? Or
yes, so it's usually 2. Mm-hmm. In the tournament mode, for now, we have only scenarios for 2 players, but we're also going to have the scenarios for 4 players, 2v2 or FFA. Mm-hmm. And in the story mode, there are at least 4 players, but some scenarios take more characters, so we can add more players. But the minimum number is 4 in the story mode.
Oh, that's good. So how do you go about setting up for an adventure game for the story game then?
Well, about the story game, we're going to have the rule book and I believe we call it storybook. I don't know the Polish name, in English is probably the storybook, where you can read all the prerequisites to start a story mode. You can play each scenario separately, or you can play it as a campaign, where you like have your progress. Some of your character dies, then you cannot have it in later scenarios, and so on. So what you do is you take the proper amount of sport tiles that are described in the scenario book. You place them in the specific order. You add some terrains. Let's add some example terrains, also described in the book, the storybook. You read which characters to place and where to place them, and some objectives, and they all depend on the story, on the specific mission, I can say.
Sure. So if you're playing a specific story, it will tell you that you have Walter or Stefan with you, and who they are and where to place them, and so that's sort of defined by the missions you're playing through in the narrative. Okay.
Yes. Exactly. So basically, have your few companions around somewhere. Let's say there's some Sturgia on the other side, and there's some clear objective of what to do in the scenario, and how you do it depends solely on you, because there are many ways to achieve the goal in the missions.
So, do you want to tell us a bit about the mechanics then behind the game?
Okay, so let's start with the left top corner. There we have the cost of the character. So when we play the rivalry mode or the tournament mode, we have a certain amount of points that we spend on our companions.
Sure.
So for example, we usually go with 60, and you just sum all the points, and you can exceed 60. In the bottom left, you have your attack profile. The number in the yellow circle is the number of attack dice, and the number below it is the minimum required roll to hit. So, for example, Samson has 8 dice that hit on 4 and higher. Sure. Then we have defense, this helmet. This is basically what we roll when we get hit. So on 6s, we can evade the damage. Then we have dexterity, this squiggly arrow. Dexterity is used when we cross some difficult terrain or when we dodge. Some characters dodge, but more about it later maybe. Then we have will. Samson is not very good example of that because he doesn't have will. He's not a human. He is the you'll read in the book. He doesn't have a will, but other characters do. When you have to take the will test, you basically roll 2 dice, and depending if you roll higher or lower, something other happens. So when you are between 6 and 10, everything is good. You pass the will test. If you roll more than 10, your character is stunned. If you roll less than 6, your character flees and get a panic token.
All right, so that really is a balancing act to play there.
Yes.
Yeah, and I imagine then that some of the characters will have a greater spread on that to show that they're a bit more willing to stick around and fight. They're a bit stronger willed, and other ones have a much narrower band. Sure.
For example, robber knights, they cannot be stunned, but because they are pretty experienced in battle, but they can easily flee because they have high those.
Yeah,
numbers.
They're like veterans. They know what they've seen before, and they don't want to see it again.
Yes, exactly.
That's a really nice feature.
This coin symbol, this influence, at the end of the turn, we get as many influence tokens as they're printed on our companions' character cards. And the influence tokens are crucial for 2 things. First of all, at the end of each turn, or rather at the beginning of every turn, we do a bidding for the initiative. So basically, in secret, we pick some number of influence tokens, we show them at the same time, and we have more than our opponent, then we have initiative. And when we have initiative, we choose who is the first player in this round. Because the game is divided into rounds.
Okay. So sometimes you want to bid low because you don't care who goes first, especially at the beginning of the game, whereas later on forcing your opponent to go first may be worth the extra gold that it's going to cost you, or the influence that you're going to spend for it.
Exactly. And that's the one way to spend or use influence token. The other is associated with so-called adventure cards. So every faction has a deck of adventure cards. There are 9 cards, 2 copy each. And there are so they're basically the special moves that are associated with every faction. Every card is unique, and they're add the flavor of the given faction to the game. So when you use these cards, sometimes there's a prompt that says that if you discard an influence token or several tokens, the effect of the card is much stronger. So you don't want to spend all the influence tokens at once on the bidding. You want to save some to use with those adventure cards. And during the game, at the end of each turn, we draw 3 adventure cards. So we have some flexibility, but it's not like we have all the cards at once.
Sure, yeah.
Okay, so that was influence. The next one is speed. So this is basically the number of tiles that we can travel in one move action. About the actions in a second. And finally, we have health. There are 2 numbers. The first number, the one without the heart, is the total life. And the number inside the heart is the heavily wounded threshold. So basically, if you take 7 wounds, then our character is heavily wounded. And it makes so that, first of all, cannot dodge. Some characters can dodge. And second of all, it's worse in combat.
It's nice. So you reach that level, and all of a sudden it becomes much worse for you and your party. Which is a nice touch. I don't particularly like games where it's all or nothing. You're fine until you're dead. At least this way, you get that nice progression where they can still act, but they're just no longer as effective as they could have been before.
Yes, exactly. And for example, some factions suffer from the heavy wounds way more than the others. The Rabbiters are heavily armored, so when they are heavily wounded, it's not that big of a deal. Of course, they fight worse, but it's not that big of a deal. But when you, for example, heavily wound Rainmar, he can no longer dodge, and he's ultra fragile then. He has only 6+ save, so he's a very easy target when he's heavily wounded.
Yeah. So, which makes an awful lot of sense. Faction-wise, with the 4 factions that you have, do they always play by themselves, or do you mix within those factions? So would you only run Black Knights together, or?
Well, technically, you should play only the ones that are in your faction. They shouldn't mix, but that's because of the story reasons. In practice, of course, you can mix them if you like, but then you're not keeping to the story. But it's okay, of course. It's a board game, so if you like, you can do that. But they're not intended to play mixed, and the balance would be off if you mix them between other factions. Because right now they're quite balanced, and if you because every faction has their own strengths and weaknesses. So if you shuffle them, then you might get very strong results or very weak results. Yeah, depending on how you mix them.
That makes an awful lot of sense. Apart from the adventure cards, there's also equipment cards within the game.
Yes.
Are they assigned based on the story, or are these things that can be acquired throughout the gaming and the campaigning?
Well, it depends on the mode. In the story mode, they're not the story-rich items. They're pretty normal items, but you can gather them throughout the story, and you can add them to your character cards so that they can progress, they can become stronger, and so on. And in the tournament mode, They just simply cost a certain amount of points, and you can buy them to enhance certain characters.
Mm-hmm. Can you alt-click on a few of them to bring them up big there, so that we have things like steeds and crossbows and...
yeah, that's one spoiler already, because right now we're not showing the mounted models, but there would be mounted models, and there would be quite a lot of them, actually.
Okay.
So that's one thing. So we have things like weapons, things like bandages, a flask, some books which certain characters can hold, which enhance their abilities, and so on. Also, we have ranged weapons.
Mm-hmm.
They're pretty rare, but there's also a possibility to do range attacks.
This is set during the Hussite Crusades. Are there hand cannons?
Could you repeat?
Because this is set during the Hussite Crusades, it was one of the first wars or sets of wars that really used hand cannons and sort of black powder weaponry.
So, no, not yet.
Not yet. So we will.
Yeah, this is a little bit earlier.
That's okay. Nobody in a suit of armor wants to see a peasant with a hand cannon.
Yes. No, this is not that they weren't described in the story. It's not this age, I believe. Yes. Well, it is this age. This is not is this century, but this is not this age.
Yeah. Very briefly, the 4 factions that you have set within the game already, they're not at the start symmetrical as far as what you get in them. Is that to reflect the way they play? So, for example, the von Sterza.
Sturgia, yeah.
Oh, so close. Family that you get 7 miniatures starting with that, but the Robber Knights only have 5. So, is there an asymmetry within the factions then?
Yes, there's actually a big asymmetry. Every faction, as I said, is very unique. Mm-hmm. So, for example, Sturgia they're the most numerous. There's a lot of them, but their skills are weaker in comparison to other factions. For example, Black Knights are the least numerous, but they're first of all very armored, and they're very strong in combat. But they're also very slow, so no mobility. Like Rawbeaters is something between, because they're not very numerous. Mm-hmm. They're also heavily armored, but they have a little bit better mobility than Black Knights, and so on.
Fantastic.
Like the most versatile faction is Adventurers, because in this faction, in other factions, most of the characters have some similarities between them. For example, Rawbeaters are all heavily armored. In Adventurers, every character is different. Like they all very different to like reflect the actual personalities of the story.
So there are 2 game modes and 4 factions planned in the initial campaign. Are you planning on expanding those, and are those factions based on a specific book with plans to expand into the others, or are they taken from various parts of the storyline?
So we're planning to add factions. We hope that at least one would be unlocked during the campaign, but we can't disclaim which one is it just yet.
Sure.
They're all from the book, from the Tower of Fools, because the game is focused only on the first tome. We are also planning to make expansions based on the other 2 tomes, but this is the song of the future.
Yeah, so down the line, get the Tower of Fools done well, and then take it from there. That sounds fascinating. I do like the idea as well that you have this relatively unexplored historical area to play in, because it's one of these geographic things outside of a small number of people. Most people don't really pay attention to this period. They're always looking at, wars in Europe tend to be focused mostly on France and people don't think about what happens in other places. So it's an area that's ripe for exploration. And the Hussite Wars were a fascinating set of crusades that people don't even realize there were crusades there. I think there were like 6. So I really like the game. The fact that it's tied to a set of books and you have that rich narrative to draw on as well looks like it should be very in depth. And obviously, if people want to go into the tournament side of things, then that's a whole other game system to explore within the world as well.
Yeah.
So yeah,
we hope it's going to be people are gonna like it basically.
Well,
we put a lot of work and heart into this, so we hope it will be good.
Yeah, I look forward to seeing where this goes. It's been great talking to you, Mikolaj. Thank you very much.
Yeah, great to meet you. Thank you.
Go ahead and check out our other content on screen now. And while you're at it, why not hit subscribe and remember to ding our dong. Go on, you know you want to click it. Go on.